Hello, hello. Welcome to Wicked Words, the podcast where you get to listen to my terrible New England accent while I talk about true crime and other dark topics. My name is Brooke, and today I put together a little story that is not the Molly Young case that I promised last episode. The Molly Young case is going to take quite a bit longer than I was expecting and is probably going to be multiple parts. So I put together a smaller episode, and today I am using a different software program, so hopefully this doesn't sound terrible. But without further ado, let's begin. In Central Falls, Rhode Island, most residents celebrate Memorial Day weekend with fireworks and cookouts. But in 1988, the community came together in an effort to find a little girl who went missing from an elementary school playground. Her name was Michelle Norris, and she was born on April 27, 1981, to Julia and William Norris Sr., meaning she had turned 7 years old just a month before she disappeared. Michelle was the only girl of the Norris' children, sandwiched between her brothers, 10-year-old William Jr. and 5-year-old Nathan. The trio were living with their grandmother Margaret, whose home was only 3 houses down from Captain G. Harold Hunt Elementary School, where Michelle was a first grader and would later go missing. Julia had recently left William Sr., or Willie as he was called, because of his alcoholism. Stricken by an infection, she was unable to care for her children, so Julia was relying on her mother. Margaret would often keep an eye on the neighborhood kids, so having her grandchildren around wasn't a problem. That Saturday, the 28th, the kids asked their grandmother if they could go to the park and play with their cousins. Margaret said yes. Before Michelle decided to leave, she had to check on her mother. "Do you need anything, Mom?" she asked. "No, honey, I'm okay. Thank you," Julia responded. Michelle gave her mother a kiss and took off with Billy and Nate. The trio met up with their cousins, one of which had some money, and asked if they wanted to go to the store and buy some candy. Billy agreed and told Michelle and Nate to stay behind with their other cousin. As the pair walked up the street, Willie happened to drive by and noticed his 2 youngest children at the playground. He called Michelle over and told her to hop in so they could go to the store themselves and get some candy. Michelle climbed into her father's car, leaving behind Nate and her other cousin. It couldn't have been more than a couple moments later that Margaret called out for the kids to come home for dinner. When only Nate returned, she told her son Charlie to keep an eye on the boy, and she marched to the playground to go get the other 2. As she approached the fence, Margaret spotted Billy returning from the store with his cousin. "Where's Michelle?" she asked. "I just saw her in Dad's car. They were driving down Pine Street," he said. The pair returned to the house, and feeling uneasy, Margaret asked Charlie to stop by Willie's house and make sure Michelle was with him. Charlie arrived at Willie's place and knocked on the door. Willie opened it, fresh from a shower, wearing just the towel. "Is Michelle with you?" Charlie asked. "No, I just got back from fishing," Willie responded. Charlie rushed home and reported his niece missing. All night, the Central Falls police searched, and the following day, the family and community assisted with no luck. It was Memorial Day after a small fire broke out at a laundromat. The fire chief decided to use his manpower and perform a grid search for the little girl. Kevin Sullivan, an 18-year-old firefighter, set about, stumbling upon a trail hidden along a wooden area. "I'm going to check down here," Kevin told his colleague. As he ducked under a broken tree, he looked to his left and saw what he initially believed to be a large doll lying on a small hill. Sullivan suddenly realized it wasn't a doll. It was the naked and beaten body of Michelle Norris, with her clothes folded beside her. He requested his chief's presence immediately. "Did you find her?" a voice yelled back. Kevin didn't want the family that had gathered to know, so he just reiterated his plea. "You'll find her back there," Kevin said, pointing down the trail. He was in shock from what he had just saw. He knew Michelle. She lived only a few houses down from him. Her lifeless body was carried out on a stretcher, covered in a dark-colored sheet. It wasn't the outcome anyone had hoped for. It unleashed raw emotion over the small town where everyone knew each other, or at least they thought they did. The citizens of Central Falls were devastated and wanted justice. How could someone rob this little girl of her innocence and her life? The scariest part had to be it was one of their own. Michelle was not the kind of girl who would go with a stranger. This was done by someone who knew her, someone who was walking freely among the streets. Almost 35 years later, and this monster has still not paid for his crime. There are so many questions. Why hasn't this case been solved? What is holding it back? Who are the suspects? We can discuss some of these, but I don't have the answers to all of them. Initially, police looked at Charles Tager, Michelle's uncle, the man who reported her missing. He was at his mother's house the day of Michelle's disappearance, so it couldn't have been him who murdered her, but he did fail a polygraph test. Those are really unreliable, so I guess it doesn't make a difference, but he was supposedly cleared after the police did a voice stress analysis test on him. And this brings us to our next person of interest, who is William Norris Sr., Michelle's father. He was the last person to see her, and according to a letter from Willie, he dropped Michelle off at Margaret's house that day, and when he was telling Michelle to go inside and let her grandmother know that she was there, she was distracted. She was staring at a little girl across the street who was standing on a porch with an unknown man, according to him. Willie didn't make sure that his daughter got into the house safely. He took off down the street to get home, and it's not known whether or not Michelle even was dropped off at her grandmother's house, to be honest. Is it possible that he took her to that spot, sexually assaulted her, murdered her, and went home and took a shower, and the amount of time that it took for Margaret to realize Michelle was missing and send her son to Willie's house? I'm not sure. To be honest, I'm not totally sure if he would have enough time to do all that. So I'm not positive that Willie had anything to do with it. Julia actually feels the same way. She told police, and there was a TV show done on this called Breaking Homicide. It was an episode that the main detective, his name's Derek Levasseur, he's a former Central Falls police detective, so the first episode of this show they decided to dedicate to Michelle. That played a big part in where the information I received from this came from, but ultimately I live extremely close to Central Falls, so it's a case that I am familiar with just from being in the area. Now, the thing with Willie is that he took off to Florida after he was arrested a couple times in the 90s. It was nothing too crazy. He was arrested for a DUI and failure to pay child support. So nothing violent, but he also wanted absolutely nothing to do with the TV show, which was a little suspicious. And he's been very low-key, like not involved in anything to do with keeping Michelle's name in the media. So it's kind of, there's a little air of suspicion around Willie. But The main suspect in this case is a man named Joe Pellen. Now, the little girl that Willie claimed Michelle was staring at on the porch with the unknown man, this was Michelle's best friend, Tammy Beelan, and the unknown man was Tammy Beelan's stepfather, Joseph Pellen. And this is important because 6 months after Michelle's death, Joseph Pellen was arrested and charged on first-degree child molestation of Tammy Beelan. And if you see pictures of these two little girls, they look almost identical. So it's kind of creepy. Joe Pellen was married to a woman named Marie Thomas, who is Tammy Beelan's mother, and he was alleged to have been very abusive to Marie Thomas. I say alleged, but if you take a look at Joe Pellen's rap sheet, which is public record, you can go on the Rhode Island Court website, look at their criminal records. He has a barrage of arrests, not just that child molestation charge, which he ended up pleading down. And unfortunately, he did not serve any time for that. He was just on probation and has to register as a child sex offender. I'm sorry. So he was also arrested for destruction of property, threatening to place a bomb in a building, disorderly conduct, domestic violence, violating protection orders. Most recently, he was arrested in Woonsocket for possession of a controlled substance. The list goes on and on. There's assault and battery. There's multiple other things. He's got a ton of restraining orders against pretty much from every woman that he's basically been involved with. He's a very strong suspect. And in that TV show, he kind of tries to give an alibi when he's confronted by Derek. And it's very confusing because at first he says, well, I was working, I was driving back from Florida, I was in Maryland, and I got a call from somebody saying that one of the kids went missing. But then if you look on his Facebook profile, which is public, again, he says something about like he was not able to be the perpetrator because he had a busted foot or a broken leg, depending on which post you read. He's really not consistent with his story. And the worst part, I think, for him is that his own brother came out and said that supposedly Joe admitted to killing a little girl named Michelle. And it's hard to trust his brother. His brother's name is John Pellen. It's hard to trust him because his brother is another sex offender. He was in prison during the taping of the episode. He was recently released. He was in prison for kidnapping a woman and raping her and beating her almost to death. She survived. They urinated. It was him and an accomplice. They urinated on her and threw her into the river in the middle of the freezing December temperatures, threw her into a river and left her to die. This woman somehow managed to swim to the other side of the river and half naked ran to a house, over a mile to a house, and got help. And somehow, by the grace of God, the accomplice had left an identifying piece of something that led right to their trail. And John Pellen and his accomplice were arrested and charged, and they were in prison for attempted murder and I believe rape and other charges. He was recently released and as far as I know is homeless in my city, which is kind of frightening. But John had an interview with Derek Levasseur, the Central Falls police detective, and had said that his brother admitted to him that he had sexually abused the little girl, got too excited, and accidentally killed her. His story kind of coincides with what is known, but again, he's not a very reliable guy. John also has a ton of arrests, and his arrests are just as violent as his brother's. He was recently arrested for vandalism. This was 3 months ago. He was arrested in Providence for vandalism. He was arrested for counterfeiting, forgery, receiving stolen goods, and I believe breaking and entering into a building, and attempted larceny. It's kind of crazy to think that these people just live all among me. They're people that I see every day, and you never know who could be a violent offender. So as far as I'm concerned, either of the brothers or both of the brothers could be involved. Who knows? It's my opinion. Don't come after me. Don't sue me. Whatever. Now, what else do we know about Michelle's murder? There isn't a whole lot available because it's still an ongoing investigation. Despite it being over 3 decades old, the Central Falls police have reassured Julia many times that they're still looking into this, and they're trying to find something to assist them to move forward in this case. And it's just hard because back in 1988, the Central Falls police, it wasn't part of their protocol to collect DNA. They didn't even have radios. That's why the firefighter was calling out, like yelling instead of radioing. It was not part of their protocol, so whether or not they have a sample that they could test against is unknown. Not sure if her clothes hold anything that maybe could be tested nowadays, but with all of the advances that we've had in DNA and forensic genealogy in the last 10 years, I feel like this case could definitely be solved if there is something to compare this to. Otherwise, it's going to take somebody coming out besides John Pellen. It's going to take somebody else coming out and saying something, because a lot of the evidence is just circumstantial, which doesn't really help her case. Now, some of the details that are known are pretty graphic, and I don't want to get into them. Just know that Tammy Pellen mentions that she was taken to the same quote-unquote hobo jungle that Michelle was taken to by her stepfather. Joe Pellen refers to this area as the hobo jungle, and he claimed that Willie, Michelle's father, liked to drink there, but he also claimed that he didn't know Willie, so it's kind of confusing again. With the recent arrest in the Christina Cole case, the family and the community are really hoping that there's going to be closure for Michelle. On a positive note, I just want to kind of close this with something a little brighter and mention that the playground where Michelle was abducted from was actually renamed after her, and there's a plaque there with her picture on it. It's quite cute. So, I mean, that was a wonderful thing that the community had did for, to keep her memory alive. And there's also it's called the Michelle Norris Memorial Award, and it's given to individuals and programs that make a difference in vulnerable children's lives. And this is given each year by the Children's Friend and Service Agency of Rhode Island. And the Providence Children's Museum was the most recent recipient, I believe. And they do some wonderful things for the underprivileged youth, especially in Providence area. But I just want to give a shout out to the Central Falls Police for never giving up on this case. And I want to give my condolences to the family. It seems that this isn't the only death that Julia has had to deal with. While I only mentioned Billy and Nate, scrolling through her Facebook, it seems that she has 2 other children that weren't mentioned. It was her oldest son. His name is Carlos Tager, I believe. And there was another son I couldn't find much information about. His name was Daryl, and he apparently passed away a few years ago. And as if it wasn't hard enough to lose one child in such a, horrific manner, to have to bury 2 children, I could not imagine what Julia goes through every day. But she is such a wonderful woman. Scrolling through her Facebook, just seeing the pictures of family she shares, and she never misses a birthday, and she's always posting like these motivational posts. It's amazing to me how she manages to keep such a positive and just bright outlook after all she's been through. It's extremely clear that she will never and has never forgot about Michelle, just like Central Falls and Rhode Island will never. I want to encourage you all to buy a book or a small toy and donate it to a shelter in Michelle's honor. And next episode, I'm not sure, honestly, if it's going to be the Molly Young case, or if I may try and do something smaller while I still work on that Molly Young case. We'll figure it out. We'll get there. It's only the 2nd episode. For sure, if you guys have any feedback, leave it down in the comments. Let me know. Feel free to message me. I am always willing to work on the presentation, the format, anything. I'm not sure how this is all going, but my main goal is to get these stories out to you guys and just kind of keep myself busy. I don't think I mentioned on my last podcast episode that I am a blind mom of 2, and I am currently waiting to go back to school. I don't start until spring, so I am taking this opportunity to put together this little podcast and spread the message, and hopefully we can do something. I doubt we'll ever solve something, but even if we could just get the story out there and have these people's stories heard by more, maybe somebody knows something. And if you got a tip, send it to the Central Falls Police. Otherwise, have a wonderful day, guys, and I will see you next time. Catch you on the flip side.